Dr. Pizzarno.
We now suffer the highest burden of chronic disease in every age group ever in human history. The environment is full of metals and chemicals that are poisoning our bodies. Things you go out to the restaurant, eat farmed fish, some of those PCBs will be in your body the rest of your life.
And they're not eating the healthy foods, and so their body's building up this toxic load over time.
Not only have we removed many of the important molecules in food, not just the vitamins and minerals, flavonoids, carotenoids, everything else, but we put into the food poisons. So nutritional level has gone down, toxin level of food has gone up.
Welcome to The Other Side of Medicine, a trusted source for education, not medication, for 35 years. In every episode of The Other Side of Medicine, we deliver health information your doctor won't tell you about. My guests are the nation's leading health experts in science-based natural medicine, physicians, authors, researchers, and clinicians. We believe natural medicine should be first, drugs and surgery last, and so we promise to deliver you the next generation of health information built on three principles: common sense, science, and cooperation with nature.
I'm Dr. Krystosik, and we're glad that you're spending some time with us this evening. I can tell you that tonight we have a very, very special guest, and I'm really excited to have this very well-known, internationally known doctor on. And he's been a great inspiration in my life and in my profession. And it's none other than Dr. Pizzarno. He's an internationally known naturopathic physician. He is so accomplished with so multiple things. He's written probably about 11 books at this time, I believe. And he also has been the one who founded the Jean Bastier Naturopathic School out in the state of Washington. And he has written hundreds of papers on natural medicine. He has, again, been an inspiration to many, many doctors across the world. And he has received many awards for his achievements over the years. And I'll tell you, it's really a privilege to have this man on the program. And I don't want you to take what he has to say lightly today, because he is so knowledgeable and so well known in the functional medicine, natural medicine circles, that this is an extraordinary opportunity for you tonight to learn about the toxins in our environment, in the air, water, and food, and in our bodies, and how we can take an active role to get rid of those and help our bodies to be able to heal itself. And that's what Dr. Pizzarno is all about. So Dr. Pizzarno, thank you for being a guest on The Other Side of Medicine here tonight.
Well, thank you for that very, very kind introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I'd like to start off with is kind of like just talk a little bit about, I mentioned that we have toxins in the air, water, and food. And so let's talk about the toxic load that we have, that we're, being exposed to every single day in our lives, in our environment.
Well, I think that's the key question. We now suffer the highest burden of chronic disease in every age group ever in human history. What happened? And you might say, well, people getting older. Well, yeah, people getting older, but everybody's got more disease. You might say, well, people's nutritional status has gotten worse. Well, actually, it hasn't. The genetics hasn't changed. What has changed? Really, one thing's changed, and that is the environment is full of metals and chemicals that are poisoning our bodies, pure and simple. And these metals and chemicals, when we measure the amount in a person's body, many of these things directly correlate with every single chronic disease.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the most prevalent toxins in our environment, and some of the ones that you have found over the years in your practice and your research to be the pesky ones that really cause a lot of problems.
So when we talk about toxins, most people think, well, is it a metal or a chemical? And more, I'm thinking a better way of thinking about it is it persistent or non-persistent? So non-persistent means that our bodies are able to get rid of them. Our detox systems will get rid of them. And most of those things, you stop being exposed, within a few days, they're all gone. Then we got the persistent ones. And persistent ones are typically either heavy metals or they're man-made chemicals that were designed to be difficult to break down by biological systems. So, for example, PCBs is one of the worst of the persistent toxins, the polychlorinated biphenyls, PCB for short. The half-life in the body, by the way, the typical toxicology research says it takes 4 half-life to get something out of the body. So some of these PCBs have
Which are coming from where? Let's let our listening audience know where they're coming from.
primarily from farmed fish. So these things have half-lives ranging from 2 years to 2 decades.
Mm.
Some of these things, you go out to the restaurant, eat farmed fish, some of those PCBs will be in your body the rest of your life.
Mm.
So now, so what's in your body? Does that mean anything? Well, yes. For example, near as I can tell, about 1/4 of diabetes is due to PCBs. Okay. About 20% of rheumatoid arthritis in women is due to PCBs. I mean, we can look at disease after disease and look at these toxins, and they directly correlate. And when we get them out of the body, people get healthier.
Mm. So that's one of those are persistent chemicals. What are some of the other persistent ones?
So it turns out there's good news and bad news. So the good news is that the worst toxin is non-persistent. It gets out of the body quickly. The bad news is that it's way more common than people realize. I'm going to surprise people when I talk about it when I say it's arsenic.
Mm.
When people think about arsenic, well, somebody's trying to poison me, the poison lead or whatever. It turns out no. Many of the water supplies are contaminated with arsenic. I'm talking about public water supplies, not just wells that were drilled in unfortunate places, but the arsenic is high in many of the water supplies. It is often high in chicken. It's often high in arsenic, in rice. And if you've got one of these old wooden climbing toys that are made with preserved woods, they have a huge amount of arsenic. So kids who crawl on that get this arsenic into their bodies. So arsenic turns out to be a huge toxin. And as near as I can tell from looking at a lot of research, about 25% to 30% of people in North America have arsenic levels known to induce disease in humans. We're not extrapolating data for animals here. We're looking at human data.
Hmm. Well, what are some of the problems that the arsenic will cause inside the human body?
So there are many areas that causes trouble. The one that is most worrisome is it directly causes DNA damage. And by the way, and this is one reason why it's so important to eat organically, not only because organically grown foods are low in toxins, but organically grown foods are high in things like flavonoids and carotenoids. And it turns out that many of these flavonoids protect the DNA from arsenic. But when you eat food that's chemically grown rather than organically grown, well, guess what? You don't have these protective molecules. You get more damage from the arsenic.
Mm. Mm. So I eat a lot of, well, not a lot, but I eat, brown rice a couple, 2-3 times a week. And you mentioned rice. That's got a lot of arsenic. So what can we do if we want to eat whole foods? We want to get rid of the carbs from hell.
Yes.
We want to eat the carbs from heaven and the healthy carbs like brown rice. What can we do?
So one is, try to find manufacturers who will actually tell you how much arsenic's in the rice.
There are actually companies that will do that.
I'm going to go further, but the problem is they won't tend to tell you. But if you find somebody who'll tell you, that sounds good. But the other part is, the good news is most of the arsenic is actually in the skin of the rice. So if you soak the rice for about 5 minutes and throw out the water and then cook it, you'll get rid of most of the arsenic. But the problem is you'll get rid of a lot of the trace minerals as well. So you got to make sure you eat organically so you get the trace minerals elsewhere, because you won't get it from the rice when you remove the arsenic.
Okay, wonderful. Well, that's really a little pearl right there in itself, because I know a lot of my listening audience, I tell them to eat these whole grain carbs, and rice, that's really a healthy one. It's got a lot of B vitamins, a lot of fiber, and it's really a good thing that people have been using for thousands of years. Yep. But it's good to know what you said. So again,
let's talk a little more about the rice. So I want to be clear. Rice does not necessarily have arsenic in it. It depends upon where it's grown. So if it's grown in an area where there's arsenic in the water, the rice will absorb it. If there's no arsenic in the water where it's being grown, the rice won't have arsenic in it. So I think that we as consumers and as healthcare professionals should demand that rice manufacturers or rice marketing people tell us how much arsenic is in the rice.
Okay, good. That's good to know. So, okay, what else should we be aware of and about the arsenic or other toxic metals that we, should do things that are practical to help ourselves to be able to protect ourselves from these things?
Yes. So actually, Kirsten, I want to say one more thing about the arsenic. So the way we get rid of arsenic is by methylating it. Okay. So one way, I don't know how many healthcare professionals are listening, but consumers as well. If a person has high levels of homocysteine in their body, it means that they're not able to produce the methyl groups they need to get rid of arsenic. So people with high high homocysteine levels have more toxicity from arsenic than those who have low homocysteine levels.
Okay, well, that's another can of worms we can open up about methylation, and that's something we talk about a little bit later. But let's just talk about some of the other problematic metals that we could be exposed to in high levels.
Yes. So the ones everybody know about is lead. So in general, we've done a good job as a society decreasing the release of lead into the environment. We got rid of lead in gasoline, things like that. So the good news is that the average lead level of the human population has gone down quite a lot, by a factor of about 5. But the bad news is, looking at people like you and myself, we made all our bones when there was a lot of lead in the environment. So when people start going through menopause and andropause, and they start losing their bone, when they lose their bone, the lead starts coming out. So while we'll see in the general population lead levels going down, when you look at the older people, their lead levels are still much higher than is appropriate or safe.
Okay. So how can we detect these metals inside of our bodies? I know I use specific labs. What do you recommend?
So I think it's really important to have objective measurements, because the problem with many of these toxins is the symptoms don't show up right away. They show up years or decades later. Well, you can't wait till your body's broken to test for the metals. So I think everybody should be tested. Matter of fact, if your audience goes to PubMed, they can see I wrote an editorial in PubMed where I recommended that the standard of care, everyday primary care, everybody should have their blood level of lead measured and the urine levels of arsenic measured. And because we can do something about it, and they cause so much disease. I mean, even today, right now, arsenic is responsible for about, around 15-20% of diabetes. It's responsible for around 25% of cancers. Okay, I mean, really significant. So we need to test them. And same thing with lead. I just looked at a study just published a few years ago, so it's not like it was old data. It's recent, it's like 3 years old, that showed that 1/3 of fatal heart attacks are due to elevated lead levels. So these are not rare things. These are things that are affecting the whole population. And the good news is we can do something about it. We can get these things out of our body. Some are easy to get rid of, like arsenic, just avoid it. Things like lead, you got to work at it. And PCBs, really hard to get rid of, but you can get rid of them.
Well, you mentioned something that I think is really interesting. When people get a little bit older, that's when the disease starts to manifest, the things start breaking down. Does it have anything to do with the toxic levels inside the body? When you're younger, you seem like you can put up with things, but then as you get older, are the toxins becoming more accumulative?
Great insight and excellent question. And the answer is yes. So when we're younger, we're more adaptable, we're more able to get rid of the toxins. But we can't get rid of all of them because they have long half-lives. So the level of the persistent toxins consistently goes up. Now what's happening here is going up, not causing enough damage yet to show up physiologically because we're adapting in other ways, but we're damaging the DNA. And once people get to by 45 to 50, they've now accumulated enough toxins and enough DNA damage that all of a sudden we get all the disease. So you look at disease correlation between biload of arsenic or mercury or whatever, and somebody below the age of about 45, there's no disease correlations because the body can adapt. Our bodies are remarkably adaptive. But once you hit that about 45 to 50, if you've not been taking care of yourself, now you start seeing all that disease start happening.
Okay. Well, that's really
now is our population is now so toxic that 45, 50-year threshold, it's been going lower and lower and lower as the amount of exposure has gone up and up and up.
Yeah, does it have anything to do as well with the the junk food diet, the standard American diet is so poor in nutrients. Our bodies are not capable of producing, the antioxidants that the body produces on its own to help to neutralize some of these things. I mean, is that part of it?
Exactly, right on. Exactly. And those foods, not only, I did a comparison once, not only have we removed many of the important molecules in food, not just the vitamins and minerals, flavonoids, carotenoids, everything else, but we put into the food poisons. So nutritional level has gone down, toxin level of food has gone up. So it turns out the primary source of most toxins for most people is from food. It's not just the food, but it's also the packaging materials. So people have heard about bisphenol A, okay? Well, now they're saying, well, bisphenol A is bad for us, and it is bad for us. They're saying, well, bisphenol A-free packaging. Well, they substitute other bisphenols that are just as toxic as bisphenol A, but people don't know about it yet. And we can go after example after example. If you people who eat fast foods, well, those fast foods themselves tend to have high phthalates, but then they put them into these plastic or coated paper containers, and that coatings are full of things to keep the paper from getting soggy from the moisture in the food. And they have things like PFASs, the perfluorinates, the forever chemicals. They've got phthalates in them. They've got bisphenols in them. So they leak into the food. So it's not just the food, but the packaging as well. It's poisoning us. It's causing disease.
So we've gotten so far away from preparing the food in our homes. People are eating out 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times a week, and they're getting exposed to all this stuff, and they're not eating the healthy foods, and so their body's building up this toxic load over time. Now, do you find in your experience, clinically, that the average person has more than one toxin that's building up inside their body? And can you talk about the idea of a toxic load or burden of several toxins maybe at a low level?
Yeah, so here's the challenge. When we're looking at research on toxicity, you want to see, well, as the toxin goes up, disease goes up as well. What you want to do is compare the exposed population to unexposed population. There are no unexposed populations. So what they tend to do is look at people at the bottom 20% of exposure, compare people in the top 20% of exposure, say, oh, see how bad that is? But the problem is, the people in the 20% exposure, they're not to zero. So it goes down, down, down to zero. So the numbers are just terrible. Everybody's exposed. You can't find an unexposed population. And people, and a lot of research is done where they try to look at just one toxin at a time. Well, that'd be great if we were only exposed to one toxin. But the problem is, as near as I can tell, there are about 100 toxins that are high enough levels in the environment that they cause measurable damage in human physiology. So people are exposed to 15, 20, 30 of these things at high enough dosages that it breaks their bodies and they get more disease.
Sometimes when I do a toxic metal test, it'll come back, maybe there'll be one particular metal that's a little bit higher or significantly higher, but then there's some others that are maybe there, but they're lower. Can you talk about the toxic load effect of several that are maybe at lower levels and that's how they can cause damage?
Another very good point. So when I'm lecturing, and I lecture to doctors all over the world on this, what I say to them, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking to you about how each of these specific toxins causes disease, but more importantly, what's the total toxic load? Because as the total toxic load goes up, we now have all this oxidative stress going on in the body, and we're depleting glutathione. So, glutathione is our anti-aging nutrient. The higher the person's glutathione level is, the less disease they have and the greater their longevity. I mean, it's been proven in species after species, the more glutathione a species can produce, the longer that species lives. So you might say, and that's the problem with a lot of this research, they try to look at just one toxin at a time. Well, that one toxin at a time, well, it's only modestly elevated, it's not that bad. But you don't get just one toxin at a time. You get all these toxins at a time, and they're not only depleting glutathione, increasing oxidative stress, but many of them interact and then have multiplicative effects. So 1 + 1 does not equal 2. 1 + 1 equals 3. 1 + 1 + 1 equals 10. I can show you why. I don't have my PowerPoint in front of me, but I in my lectures I say here's a study where they did a cell culture of neurological cells. They put in a little mercury, got some damage. Put a little aluminum in by itself, got some damage. Put a little phthalates in, got some damage. They put them all three in and way, way more damage.
Mhm. So, I was so excited having you on the program. I forgot to start off with, but what inspired you to become a naturopathic doctor? I mean, that's fundamental. I didn't ask you. I apologize for that.
So my story is a little longer than most people and a little unusual. A lot of people come into this medicine because of a personal health experience. I came into this medicine intellectually. So after graduation in chemistry from college, I went to a doctoral program at Cornell University. And after the height of the Vietnam War, and I decided I didn't want to be involved in the war effort. So I decided to get involved in medicine, came out to Seattle and started working in medical research, and I loved it. I thought, I think I'm going to go and get a PhD in medical research instead. So, but while I was doing this research, something happened that had kind of a big effect on me. And that is the woman who married my roommate from college had suffered from juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. She had swollen hands and feet and knees and ankles, whatever, since she was a teenager. And we had dinner one day, and she said, well, my arthritis is gone. I said, what? Your arthritis is gone? The reason I was so surprised is because I was working at the University of Washington Department of Rheumatology looking for a cure for arthritis. There was no cure for arthritis. And of course, we're looking for a drug cure. So, well, how did you get cured? This incurable disease. She said, well, I went to a naturopathic doctor. I said, what's that? So then, being curious, I went to the naturopathic doctor and asked him, so what'd you do with my friend? He said, I detoxified her liver and taught her how to eat properly. What? And that got rid of her arthritis. Now, that wasn't enough to convince me. So then I was working in the research, and there was an MD came in for a postdoc. She got this grant to study a new drug for rheumatoid arthritis. And we're using a duck model. And the reason we use a duck model is because, with their feet, you can easily determine what's going on with the joints. So we got the ducks into the vivarium, and we went to check on them. And there these ducks were in these 1 by 1 foot cages, and they looked miserable. Now, you might say, how can you tell an animal looks miserable? If you have a pet, you know when an animal is unhappy, okay? Mm-hmm. They're looking miserable. So being a kind-hearted woman, she got together with her husband, and they found an empty room in the vivarium, right? And they built a little, brought some plywood and got a plastic swimming pool, got some sand, got some fresh fruit and fresh vegetables, I guess is what they got for them. And they made a little duck run. We came back in a week later, and the ducks were running up and down and swimming and quacking, and everybody was happy. So, okay, great. Now we can do our research on them. So these ducks were genetically bred to get rheumatoid arthritis. So there we are. We're going to test the standard model for testing these drugs. So we said, okay, now they should get arthritis in about a week. A week went by. Another week went by. 2 months went by. They didn't get the arthritis. So we had a going away party for this poor woman, and everybody was consoling her and saying, it was too bad, your experiment was a failure. I looked at them and said, wait a minute, don't you get it? If you feed them properly, get exercise, reduce the stress, reduce the trauma to their bodies, guess what? You don't need the drugs. And I said, at that point, I think I'm not going to go with medicine. I'm going to go with natural medicine instead. And
sure.
There I am.
Yeah. Vis medicatrix naturae, right?
Vis medicatrix naturae, yes.
Yeah, that's my battle cry ever since I first got introduced to that phrase by you. I was like, again, you've been such an inspiration in my career that I just echoes throughout my whole career about all the things that you've taught me in your books, and they've been just really phenomenal, and I just can't thank you enough. But let me say
something there first. Also, we have to thank Mike Murray. So Mike Murray was one of my students.
Yeah, I had him on recently on the program. I just had him on a couple of weeks ago, so I gave him lots of accolades too. So yeah, I'm glad you're saying that.
Yeah. So he was a third-year student. He came into my office, as president last year, and said, this medicine looks so good, but it hasn't been proven scientifically. Why don't we write a textbook? And so Michael and I decided to write a textbook, and we went looking into the research. We found literally 10,000 articles showing that our way of doing things was right, that nutrition was incredibly important, that detoxification is important. There's all this research. Nobody put it together. So we wrote the textbook in natural medicine, became a huge success. And most people aren't aware of this, but we have sold, as near as we can tell, about 100,000 copies of the textbook in natural medicine in 4 languages. We basically changed the practice of medicine more than I think most people realize.
Oh, it has. It has. And the thing about it is, when you first investigated, there was 10,000 articles, but there's probably 50 times as many now.
Easily.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole. Well, by the way, I wanted to share before I forget. You mentioned that duck story. I have a dog story to tell. When I first got into using natural medicine in my practice, my brother had a Lhasa apso, and he had golf ball-like deposits of calcium on his spine. And my brother brought him over to my home, and his back legs were dragging to the ground. And he had arthritis so bad, his veterinarian said he wanted to put him to sleep. So my brother brought him over, and he was so angry. The dog was so angry, you couldn't touch him even. He was so much pain. So I put him in the corner by the front door. I made a little cage there for him. And all I fed him was carrot juice. I just gave him carrot juice. Well, the first day he just came up, sniffed it, and walked away. The second day he started drinking it. I started giving him carrot juice, and I gave him fish oil, omega-3 fats. And after about drinking the carrot juice, he started drinking it every day because I didn't give him any water. And after about a week, he started to get up a little bit and move around. In a month, he was walking around. 2 months later, he was running around our farm. That's how powerful the body is capable of healing itself.
Yes.
So it's so wonderful to see, and it's not placebo. This is real. This is real science and physiology. The body working to heal itself. The power that the body has to heal itself is so miraculous. We just lose sight of it, and we get caught up and enamored by the modern medicine, which has its place. We know that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
When it's emergency medicine, especially. But I was just at the Cleveland Clinic the other day and visiting a friend who was dying, and it was so sad to walk in that intensive care unit, and there's just people laying there like vegetables. And it doesn't have to be like that, does it?
No. I really want to thank you for that statement. The body has tremendous ability to heal if we just give it a chance. And what we need to think about, the way you give the body a chance is you make sure the nutrients that are needed are there, and make sure the toxins that are not needed are out of the body. And I read a study a few years ago that I now tell every one of my students, and that was a study on people with stage 5 kidney failure. So these are people who are on basically kidney replacement on the wait list, and they had an average EGFR, that's a measure of kidney function, of only 12. Now, it should be above 70. Higher the better. 80 to 100 is really what you want, but it needs to be at least above 70. So there were 12, they were on dialysis, needed kidney transplant. They decided to do a 6-month experiment while they were waiting. And they only did one thing. They said, stop taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, plus Tylenol, or plus acetaminophen. So no ibuprofen, no aspirin, no acetaminophen. They got rid of all the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. 6 months later, the EGFR had over doubled to 25. Just by stopping the damage to the kidneys. Because these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are incredibly damaging. I mentioned before these environmental toxins, metals, and chemicals. Folks, we have to add to our list prescription drugs. Most people are not aware that properly prescribed prescription drugs are the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. Not that drugs are bad, but drugs in place of living healthfully and dealing with the actual causes of disease, drugs in that situation are not a good idea, because all they're doing is covering up the symptoms of the body breaking, when you should be paying attention to, well, there's a symptom. The body's trying to tell me something. What's it trying to tell me? Oh, I'm poisoning myself, or I'm missing a nutrient. Take care of it then. Don't wait till the kidneys have failed.
Yeah. Well, I've been, able to watch where people had, kidney failure, and by applying these natural principles, their body was able to repair and reverse the kidney damage. Have you seen that in your practice?
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. It's really powerful. So I wanted to talk about, again, the body's capacity to heal itself. And we're talking about that right now. So maybe we could segue in talking about the liver and, how the liver detoxifies. Can you talk about, that with the phase 1 and phase 2 and how the body is able to get rid of these toxins if we give it a chance?
Mm-hmm. So our bodies are actually very good at getting rid of toxins. Most people don't realize, but about 25% of the energy produced by the body, ATP, is actually used for detoxification. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of that is because we produce molecules in the body that once they do their job, got to get rid of them. So inflammatory molecules. Once you have inflammation, you signal the body to take care of it. Now you got to break those inflammatory chemicals down. Our hormones that give us our male and female characteristics. Well, once they've done the job, you got to get rid of them. So a lot of these molecules in the body has to get rid of. So we're really good at detoxification. So that's one reason why some environmental toxins we're exposed to, they don't last in the body very well, because either we were exposed to them as we evolved as a species, or they're similar enough to things we already have good mechanisms for getting rid of. So that works well. So with the liver, it has what's called a kind of a 2-phase detoxification process. Some people say phase 3 as well, but I'll just deal with phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 gets rid of some toxins directly, like caffeine, for example. There's an enzyme in the liver called saccharin P452 1A2, and 1A2 detoxifies caffeine. That goes great. However, many of these toxins are harder to detoxify. So what phase 1 does is it moves it into what's called an activated intermediate, which is actually more toxic. So for cigarette smoking, it actually makes cigarette smoke more carcinogenic. So it's problematic. But then the body has phase 2, which then does something called conjugation, which means adding a neutralizing molecule to the chemical. So by making the chemical more active, and then the neutralizing molecule can be bound to it, now makes it either non-toxic or water-soluble, so it can be peed out or excreted through the bile. So we need to have both of those functioning. People run into trouble when either of them not functioning very well, but they run into the most trouble when the second phase 2 is not functioning, because then those phase 1 intermediates get higher and they actually cause more damage.
Well, can I simplify it for our listening audience to say that when phase 1, and tell me if I'm wrong, would be like collecting the garbage that you have, in your home or in your yard, putting it in plastic bags and tying it up, and then you put it on the front lawn. Phase 2 is when the dump truck comes along, and the garbage truck comes along and takes it away. Would that be a good analogy?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Okay, well, I tried.
But it's a good idea. I'm going to have to think about that, see if I can tweak it a bit. But
because I try to simplify it for people to understand that the body collects it in phase 1, right? Collects the toxins, right? Well, and then you have to pull them out of the body. Then you have to get rid of it, right?
Yep.
So if you come up with a better one, I would love to hear it.
But you bring up a good point. I'm so much into the science and so used to talking to healthcare professionals. I sometimes forget to make it understandable to people.
Oh, that's okay. No, I try to make it so that people could get a little bit of an analogy to understand. But the point is that phase 1 helps to collect the toxins, and if you don't collect them, it backs up. Then you're going to have toxicity really building up in the body. So you have to have both phases working, and the other one carries it out of the body. Would that be okay?
Sounds good to me.
All right, for now. All right, so we come up with something better. But anyway, so the body's got that capacity, but then there's a certain point where it's overloaded. It's too much, right? It only has so much capacity.
Yeah, both we get overloaded, but also again, so many nutritional deficiencies. Those enzymes are highly dependent upon nutrients. For example, the phase 1, they're all iron dependent. Mm-hmm. So every woman who has anemia is going to have trouble because of menstruation. She's going to have trouble detoxifying because there's not enough iron for the phase 1 to work properly. So there's just
what are some of the other nutrients besides iron that are needed for phase 1 and phase 2?
So you look at the list, virtually every required vitamin and mineral is used in detoxification. And the B vitamin is by far the most important, but they're all there. Okay. I was really surprised when I started looking at, these are the cofactors, the vitamins and minerals needed for this enzyme. These are the ones needed for that enzyme. These are the ones needed for that enzyme. And I looked at the list and said, they're all there. There's nothing missing.
Well, that's where it comes into the mindset again, where we say food is the best medicine. And if you feed your liver the right foods and give it the fruits and vegetables with the minerals and the vitamins and all the things, and eat the whole grains and nuts and seeds, you're giving all those nutrients. The body then can use its capacity to detoxify on its own and keep things working well. And it's more preventative, yes, but at the same time, if it's weaker and the phase 1 and phase 2 are not working, and you replenish those foods as medicine, it begins to work again, and the body does what it's supposed to do.
Yes, yes. So we haven't actually talked about this, but I want to mention it. One of the most common questions I get is, what's the best diet? Okay. And I've looked at that a lot, and over time I said, well, I think this diet's a little better than that diet. But the more I've looked at it, the more I've come to a conclusion, it's not the diet that's important, it's the food that's important. As long as you're eating healthy food, and with reasonable, don't get too weird, but within moderation, you're eating a diversity of foods, you're probably going to be fine. But if you're eating the super fancy diet that's supposed to be wonderful for you, but you're eating chemically grown foods, it's not going to do you much good, because it's all about the food. The nutrients aren't in the food, your body's not going to work. And if the food's full of toxins, the body's not going to work. It doesn't matter what kind of diet you're on.
Now, let's talk a minute about how, there's a lot of people today who are getting really caught up into keto diets and the paleo diets and the carnivore diets.
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about toxic acid waste that's produced from the wrong types of foods, especially, the high saturated fat, and of course, sugars and refined carbohydrates? Can we talk about that for a minute? Because I think people are so confused today, and there is a lot of research to show that toxicity is created by too much saturated fat and too many refined carbohydrates and sugar. Isn't that true?
So it can cause toxicity because it impairs the body's ability to get rid of toxins, and also it promotes the growth of the wrong kind of bacteria in the gut. And one of the big loads that the liver has is molecules produced by the wrong bacteria in the gut. So these things, while the toxin might not be in that particular food is going to induce the growth of the wrong bacteria in the gut, and they'll produce all these molecules that are hard on the body and use up the liver's functional capacity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't think of the lady's name right now, but she's a researcher and she's a medical doctor. She wrote a book called Acid Alkaline Balance, and she talked about how the acid waste produced from lots of animal protein will become toxic to the body. I can't think of her name right now. I will before we get through this.
So if you go to PubMed, I wrote an article, I co-authored an article in 2010 with Linda Frassetto. I don't know if that's the one you're talking about. That's one of them. Well, she's the researcher, but no, there's a medical doctor. Yeah, I read Dr. Frassetto's research, but that's not who I'm talking about at the moment. And I'll think of the lady's name. I want to validate what you're saying, though. So what happens when people are eating an acid-forming diet? It's hugely problematic for the body. And here's what's going on. When you're eating an acid-forming diet, you've got to get rid of the excess acid. And it's primarily the responsibility of the kidneys to get rid of the excess acid. Well, when the kidneys are spending all this energy to get rid of the excess acid, they can't get rid of the other toxins. Okay? And not only that, but as the toxic load increases, kidney function decreases because they're damaged by having to deal with all this excess acidity. So one of the reasons why people have failing kidneys as they get older, because of a lifelong consumption of too much acidity in the diet, consumption of all these prescription and non-prescription drugs that damage the kidneys, the environmental toxins damaging the kidneys. It's not surprising we lose our kidneys because we're basically overloading them with all these poisons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, anyways, the preponderance of these diets today that are circulating, it's really hard because the average person gets drawn into them because they promise them to lose weight, and they do. And they in the short term, they get reduction of blood sugars because they're getting rid of all the standard American refined carbohydrates and sugars. But in the long run, it's not only causing toxins to build up in the body, but it's putting an extra burden, like you said, on the gut and so many other systems, the cardiovascular system. So there's a lot of ramifications from those, and people are getting sucked into them. And that to me is very disturbing.
Yes. So remember I said it's all about the foods unless your diet doesn't get too extreme. So the ketogenic diet is a good example of an extreme diet. You can be healthy doing it, but once you get to the extremes, you have to be a lot more careful. Same thing with a vegan diet. So a vegan diet is extreme. You can be healthy on a vegan diet, but you got to be more careful about it because now you're moving into territory where it's harder to the body to adapt and where there's particular issues where there's certain nutrients that are always going to be deficient, and there's certain nutrients that may be a little excessive. And that's what happens with the high meat diet too.
I would put my money more on a vegan diet than I would worry about the dangers of a vegan diet than a keto or a carnivore diet. I think that again those things again if you have an educated vegan diet is extraordinarily healthy. I'm not personally a vegan. I'm a pescatarian. I eat a little bit of fish a couple times a week. By the way, I want to talk about that if you think that's healthy. But again, if you have an educated vegan and you have an educated keto person, I think that the vegan is going to win every single time in the long run. That's my estimation.
I think that's true. And I also think it's primarily because of the food. Because if your person is going to go on a ketogenic diet that's going to be relatively healthy, go hunt your own deer. Okay, go get all your own wild caught fish. You can't eat the foods of commerce and a ketogenic diet and expect to be healthy because those foods are just too unhealthy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sure. Okay, so what about eating fish a couple times a week? You said there's a lot of the PCBs in fish. What about eating fish a couple times a week? If you're eating small fish, would that be okay?
Yes. So I am also primarily vegetarian, but I do eat fish once or twice a week. And so what I try to do is eat small fish that are low in mercury and are wild caught. So that means you're small. I'm fortunate here in the Pacific Northwest. I can get fresh caught wild salmon, small wild salmon, and it's as healthy food as you're going to get. Now that's wild caught salmon up around from Alaska.
Yeah.
About Atlantic salmon. Well, Atlantic salmon is farmed salmon, and you look at the toxins in that, and it's really bad. I'm sure the fish farmers can be mad at me, but I go all around the world saying, never ever eat farm fish. They're just too unhealthy.
Well, they're not only like you said loaded with PCBs. They feed these fish animal food. Fish in the wild don't eat animal food, right? So there's a lot of reasons why they don't really have the omega-3 fats in concentration like the wild caught ones, which are beneficial, but they also have concentration of toxic compounds. So it really behooves people to pay attention and get the fish as close as they can to pristine waters like in Alaska. And like I said, that's really good. And there's a lot of good companies out there that you can get Alaskan caught fish from, and they can send it directly from their fish ports that they catch them in, and they get it that fast to you.
Yeah, I don't have a commercial relationship, but we use Vital Choice. So Vital Choice, every few months we'll get a shipment from them of frozen fish, which goes right into the freezer. It's really healthy, and not only is it healthy, it tastes good too.
Oh, sure.
We don't eat out much anymore because the food we make ourselves at home is way better than anything we get in a restaurant.
Absolutely. That's what my wife says too. She says it all the time. She says, I don't want to go to restaurants anymore. We make so much good food at home, Yes. And it's simple. It's, we just came back from Portugal, and I'll tell you what, it was absolutely amazing. The food there tasted so much different. A potato there does not taste like a potato here. It was just exceptional. And all the foods there tasted so different. And I heard about it, but I experienced it firsthand. Have you been to Europe and tasted some of the foods there?
Oh, yes. That's my experience as well. And that's one of the things that led me to start growing as much of my own food as I can. Matter of fact, I'm right now working on adding 250 square feet to my vegetable garden. It's a bunch of work, but I know I'm going to have this really healthy food because I can totally control it. It's really healthy.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about, you have some services that you provide for helping people to identify if they end up having the toxic metals or they lack the enzymes to be able to to get rid of these toxic metals. Can you talk a little bit about what you're working on, some of the things that you're doing?
Sure. Well, the currently available resource that I encourage people to consider for doctors, I co-authored a textbook called Clinical Environmental Medicine, where we lay out for doctors all the diseases caused by these toxins, how do you measure them, how do you get them out of the body. And then I wrote a book for consumers called The Toxin Solution, where I lay out for people, what do you do about this? So basically I provide an 8-week program. The first 2 weeks is all about avoiding the toxins. And the reason I really work at that is if you're really good at avoiding the non-persistent toxins for those 2 weeks, people will start feeling better already, which then will engage them to do the more deep work. So we then spend 2 weeks cleaning up the gut, because most of the load on the liver comes from the gut, from wrong bacteria in the gut. Let's clean up the gut. Then we want to clean up the liver, get the liver detoxifying properly, and then we want to get the kidneys functioning optimally. After about 8 weeks, now the body's working properly. We've decreased exposure. We've got the organs of elimination working properly. Now we start doing detoxification. I say to people, don't start doing detoxification until your body's ready. You got to get the gut ready, the liver ready, the kidneys ready, because if you release the toxins quicker than your body can get rid of them, you're going to just make yourself sicker. So at that point, then have people do saunas and such, and really good results.
So where can people get your book?
Amazon.
Amazon.
$15 on Amazon. It's a cheap book.
Do you have a picture of it right there, or do you have a copy of it right there to show us? No, Doc, you're not a good marketer there, Doc. You gotta have
I'm not a good marketer.
That's okay. I'll post it on our website, and I'll post it in our social media. But I want to talk a little bit also about stress as a toxin. Stress is a toxin. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And the problem with stress, of course, it makes everything not quite as well. So when we're looking at people under stress, I'm just trying to remember, there's a study I just read on stress and toxins. I'm blanking on what it was, but clearly the more psychological, you got these measures of psychological stress. Higher the measure of psychological stress, the greater the damage that the toxin does. I don't remember the studies. So I can't give you more detail than that.
That's okay. Yeah, well, we just know that stress puts an extra burden on the body, and it produces toxic elements. I mean, you're going to have high levels of cortisol. High levels of cortisol in your body are going to really put a lot of extra burden on all the body parts and to damage them, right? I mean, it's not good. So, but also I wanted to talk a little bit about how sometimes people will think, oh yeah, I'm going on a detox. Mm-hmm. And then they go for a 3 or 7 day cleanse. I'm going to detox my body. And they think 3 and 7 days, they're going to get rid of the toxins out of their body. And they kind of pat themselves on the back, thinking that they did something good. Talk a little bit about how that's kind of like ridiculous.
Yeah. So thank you. So there's 2 pieces. Number one is no point going on a detox program until you've stopped exposing yourself to toxins. And that actually, you got to work at it, because our environment is really toxic. Virtually, you go in a regular grocery store, all the products there are the foods there are typically chemically grown, so low in nutrients, high in toxins. The health and beauty aids that are there, they're high in phthalates and bisphenols and things like this. They're pretty unhealthy places to be. So you got to start by saying, okay, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to change how I'm letting things come into my environment. Look at the water, the air, the food, health and beauty aids, everything. Stop the exposure. Then you can start looking at the detox. But the problem is, many of these detox things, they basically stimulate the body to start releasing toxins from the tissues. Well, as I said before, if your liver and kidneys aren't functioning well, the levels are just going to go up. And there's plenty of research on that. When you look at a highly toxic population, you put them on a detox program like fasting, things like that, they get way sicker initially. Okay,
so let's say that again slowly, so our listening audience can really hear that. Okay, say it again slowly. When you have
stop exposure. No point in going on a detox program if you're still being exposed.
And why is that?
Stop the exposure, because if you go on a detox program and you're still being exposed, the detox program will often release more toxins from the tissues. Now you got even higher levels.
Yes, that is so important. So you're actually doing more damage than good if things aren't working like they should, and get that liver and kidneys working, and your colon as well, right? It's all part of the complex of the detoxification system. I really think that's really important, because I know that you've heard of many people say it over the years. Oh yeah, I'm just going on a 3 or 7 day detox, and they really think they're doing themselves a lot of good. Folks, you're not. This gentleman here is really a world expert on detoxification. And trust me, what he says is really like the gospel when it comes to detox. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay, so what would you say to change the lifestyle so it's a lifestyle that's going to be really to reduce the toxic load? What were, you mentioned it for a little bit, but kind of reiterate it again. What are the things we have to do to make sure that we have less of a burden of toxins in our life?
Yeah. So this is not easy. So I've realized that we have both active things we can do and passive things we can do. So active things means you got to make a decision. Passive things mean you've changed your environment. You don't have to keep on making decisions. Just do it once and it's okay. So for example, put a MERV 16, or at least a MERV 12, but I use a MERV 16 air filter in your forced air heating. Now, why is that important? So MERV 16 will clear out all the particulate matter in the air. Anybody living in a city or within 100 yards of a freeway or major highway is being constantly exposed to particulate matter that's being released into the environment. That particulate matter is one of the main causes of disease. Okay, arsenic is worse, but particulate matter is right up there. So put a really good filter in your house, in your forced air heating. Now, if you don't have forced air heating, then every room in which you spend time should have an air filter in it to clear these things out. So It turns out this is really effective at improving health. Now, the second thing to do is the water supply. So at the very minimum, put a carbon block filter on the water coming into the house. Now, some people get these little water filters, put them on their kitchen sink. Well, that's fine. But when you're taking a shower and all that water is evaporating and such, guess what? Any toxins in that water, you're breathing it in. So get a carbon block filter. And if you can spend money, get a carbon block filter that will also get rid of arsenic and precipitate out any heavy metals. So those are two passive things we can do that once you do them, set them up, takes a little bit of money, but once you set it up, you're good forever. Now, the active ones are all your health and beauty aids. You can get a little app, like one I use is called Think Dirty. Just take a little picture of the barcode, and it'll tell you what toxins are in that health and beauty aid. If there's phthalates in it, if there's bisphenols in it, if there's lead in it, okay, parabens, all this stuff, don't use it. They're really toxic for you. And you say, well, I've got to put some oil on my skin because it gets too dry. Put coconut oil on, organic coconut oil. Works really well and doesn't put any poisons in your body. And then we get to food. About 60% of the toxins are coming from food, which means you only organically grown foods and you only get them in containers that are safe. Well, the reality is most of them are containers in the grocery store that aren't safe. So if you got to have that food, bring it home, remove it from that container, put it into a glass container immediately, because these things are time dependent. The longer it's in the container, the higher the temperature of the container, the more toxins that go into it. So stop that process as soon as you can. Then in your kitchen, throw away the aluminum, throw away the Teflon coated things. Okay, you're much better off using we like using ceramics. That works pretty well. Ceramics and stainless steel tend to be your best choices. So as you do these things, over time, what happens is your body load keeps going down and down and down, and your health keeps going up and up and up.
That is really solid, practical information for people to take to the health bank for sure. So thank you so much for that. Now, can we talk just a few minutes about, I'm really big on food as the best medicine, some of the herbs that help to detoxify the body.
Mm-hmm. So there are many, and it kind of depends on where you want to do detoxification. So the safest one to use, and the reason I say safe, because some people are really toxic, and if you give them anything, they get worse. So you have to take way more sophisticated strategies. But for most people, what you want to do is increase your glutathione levels. So an herb like milk thistle increases glutathione levels in the body. A dietary supplement called N-acetylcysteine, or NAC for short, increases glutathione production. Because glutathione is by far our most important molecule for protecting us from environmental toxins. So glutathione not only helps reduce the oxidative stress, but glutathione specifically binds to mercury, get out of the body. And many of these chemicals, when we're detoxifying them, the phase 2 detoxification is binding glutathione to these things. So, for example, why is it alcohol a problem? Well, alcohol depletes glutathione. So if you have a person who having toxic exposure, who's also drinking a lot of alcohol, they're depleting the glutathione, which means they're going to be more toxic. So it's not only putting things in, but it's also not putting things in. And one of the things not to put in is don't drink too much alcohol. Now, I'm not saying...
So the alcohol we're talking about, are we talking about wine? Or are we talking about like rum, like gin or rum or something like that? What are we talking about?
Great question. So as long as the amount of alcohol is less than 1 ounce of ethanol, we're going to be fine. 1 ounce for women, 2 ounces for men. It's not going to be causing trouble. But once you get above that, that's where you start having trouble. So like basically 1 drink for a woman, 2 drinks for a man. But having said that, if you look at the aged alcohols, the bourbons, the whiskeys, things like that, they're nice, that nice kind of brown color. That brown color is a lot of really bad molecules.
Okay.
These ketones and aldehydes and just really bad stuff. So hate to say it, your whiskey and your bourbons and things like that, they're just not safe to drink. So
wine would be better.
Yeah.
Wine would be better.
Wine and beer are actually have other molecules in them that actually help protect against any damaging effects from the alcohol. But again, if you drink
a little bit.
Yeah. The research is clear. A glass of wine a night for a woman, 2 glasses of wine a night for a man, basically because men are bigger than women, is fine and has positive health effects. Above that, it starts going down.
That's really great. Okay, well, this is really good practical information for our listening audience. So, Dr. Pizzorno, will you come back someday and be our guest again? You were just so wonderful tonight to have you on and share all this information. Would you be happy to do that? Would you be willing to do that?
Well, thanks for the kind compliment. I'm always happy to resource. This is what I do in the world. I teach doctors and primarily, but I also teach consumers on how to be healthy. And I feel strongly about this. And you probably have the same experience that I'm having. People and my wife and my age group, our family and friends, they're dead. They have major disease, or they're done with life. And my wife and I are just so active. Matter of fact, we're planning a motorcycle trip to Scotland next fall because I've been invited to lecture on environmental medicine in London. So somebody's going to fly me across country, across the ocean, bring my wife along. We're going to have some fun.
That's nice.
There's nobody else in my age group. So there just aren't other people in my age group who do this because they're all kind of done. Their body's broken.
Sure. Well, that's great. And we really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing this valuable information. And again, to get your book, go to Amazon. It's called The Toxin Solution.
Toxin Solution.
And I'm sorry?
Yeah, The Toxin Solution.
Yeah, and for physicians, there's actually one for doctors who want to know. And it's called, what is it for the doctors?
It's published by Elsevier. It's Clinical Environmental Medicine.
And that is available on Amazon as well.
Amazon as well, yes. Now that's more expensive. How much it is, $100 or something.
Okay, that's awesome. And you've got a book called Textbook of Natural Medicine, which I highly recommend. I think it's a 2-volume set. Is that what it is?
Yeah, we're back to 2 volumes again. We had just
I've got that. And I'm just really, I showed you the first volume I had when this before the 2-volume came out, which is a hard copy. I use this one a lot. And I really put it to the grind there. So I really want to thank you for all those years. This man right here, folks, is an internationally known doctor that has just been a stellar pioneer. He's received awards from all kinds of holistic medicine organizations for his work and his pioneering work. So we want to thank you again, Dr. Pizzorno, and we'll have you back in the future.
Thank you so much. And more importantly, thank you for this really important work that you do.
Okay, my friend. Take care, everybody. You listen to The Other Side of Medicine. We'll be back next week.